Welcome to the activation phase. I'm JP and joined, as usual, by my co-host Tim.
Hey there, JP.
Yo, we are doing the Norse Gaels today.
Yeah, great faction. Let's go into it.
Yes. How would you describe the Norse Gaels?
Aggressive. That's the one word. I think straightforward. In your face. I found many more words that say the same.
I'm not sure about straightforward, but they are in your face. But I think they have a few combo tricks that we need to get our head around. But they're a nice little faction. You don't actually see that many of them around. But maybe let's dive into a little bit of the fluff, the lore.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's a bunch of Vikings that came to Ireland, Isle of Man, various islands around Scotland, settled, killed, I guess, enslaved the men, took the women.
Yeah.
And then kind of made their own little, got their own little vibe going, basically. So what they, how they differ from just your standard Vikings is mostly in, well, first of all, the battle board, but also in the equipment options, because unlike our previous episode of the Vikings, you actually have quite a few equipment options available to you. So this is as good a time as any to jump into that. So let's go. The Warlord has either no special equipment or can take a heavy weapon.
Yeah.
Nice. Hearthguard, same idea. Either no special equipment options or heavy weapons. Warriors can either have javelins or heavy weapons. And levies can only have javelins. Nice.
Great equipment options. Holy moly.
I think we like heavy equipment, heavy or Dane axes. I think I'm a fan.
Yeah, and the javelins are also great.
Yeah, +1, always good. Let's go to, I guess, the battle board.
Let's get into it. Do you want to start us off with the top here?
Sure. This one is different from usual. So the first three, the classic Hearthguard heroes, warriors, and Levy are the same. What's relevant to know is that Levy are called slaves. This pops up in the board. So when we reference slaves later on, that's why. The combat bonus, a little bit strange. It's melee or shooting, but you only gain attack dice, no defense dice. This is, I think, what we call a foreshadowing of the rest of the board. So quite a yeah. So you said aggressive, so this kind of underlines that. So it's the usual: gain 1 attack dice, 2 if you use a rare, and then finally the activation pool, again orders, and it's the same as usual. So really, just the combat bonus is a little bit different, but the combat bonus does a lot of work on this battle board.
Hell yeah, it does. Let's get into the first ability that actually uses the combat bonus, which is Spill Blood. It's a melee or shooting ability that takes a common die. After the shooting attack or melee has been resolved, roll as many of your available Saga dice as there were models removed as casualties, your own and the enemy's. Place all these dice rolled in your combat bonus. So, yeah, you pump up a melee, it gets really deadly, lots of models die, and then nice, you end up with some nice dice for your combat bonus, which you can use for your next fight. Really good.
Just as a reminder, what are available Saga dice?
that's the only tricky thing here. You're absolutely right. So available Saga dice are basically the dice that you haven't rolled. So the dice that you can still roll. And because if you in the beginning of the turn, you roll your Saga dice, the number that you generate, let's say 5, and then you have 8 in total only. And so this is the cap. You can never generate more than 8 dice with Spill Blood. And also usually I think you should have 1 more activation left. And if that's a We Obey, that's great. So 8 dice is possible. But yeah, that's the cap. Maybe you have a better explanation than I do, JP.
No, that's fine for now. I think as long as people realize that you're not throwing the dice that you've already thrown. So would you say that this is better once you've already spent a few dice already? Otherwise, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, of course. This is I think usually this is my second last ability that I play, or like in one of the latter combats per turn, because loading up your combat bonus one more time to go with Norse or whatever ability on here is just really good.
Yeah, this is also, you can just use it in your opponent's turn as well. So I'm not sure you want to. You're kind of stuck in your turn in terms of maybe not having enough dice to actually do what you want to do, but still, the option is there. All right, so the next one is for an uncommon called Determination, which is really nice when they have an ability which also means something else, but never mind. This is a melee ability. So if a unit wins the melee, your opponent cannot charge it at the start of your next turn. This is super annoying if you actually want to finish off a unit, but it does mean, well, if you're like Vikings or something with not a lot of shooting, this is going to be a problem. It's going to be really annoying to murder a unit and fatigue bomb if you play this. But they can still shoot. So, for example, composite bows, or I guess even guys with javelins, can just kind of throw their sticks afterwards, after the melee, and kind of plink off the last few guys. But still, pretty annoying for melee factions.
This is god tier good to have a warlord with his heavy weapon. Just if he just takes out one figure in the enemy unit, he will have won that melee, and so he will not be able to be charged in the whole next turn. So when your opponent doesn't have a lot of shooting, that's devastating.
Nice.
Next up is Howling Axes. It's a melee ability that takes 2 common dice. Gain 3 attack dice. During this melee, gain 1 attack die each time you trigger your combat bonus. Yeah, so this is... I always think this is kind of expensive, but 2 commons is okay. This just means that your combat bonus, it will make for a huge melee attack. So if you have this down and you have the 5 dice in your combat bonus, which is very easy with this board, you have a ton of attacks. So that's if it's just 5 commons in your combat bonus, that's 10 extra attacks through Howling Axes instead of 5 extra attacks. So 3 dice. So 7 dice will give you 13 attacks. And of course, this works super well with just pumping up a big important melee. But I think two dice is expensive.
All right. We're going to shooting now. So this is Gaels, ! Using a common dice again. Shooting attack, shooting. Gain 2 attack dice. During the shooting attack, gain 1 attack dice, your combat bonus. So just as a reminder, you have warriors with potential for javelins. So they can pump up your shooting pretty nicely.
Yeah, this is basically the ability from before, Howling Axes. It's the same effect, but just for shooting for one die. And this is great value. Like getting so many shooting dice so cheaply, it's great. It makes your levy shooting hurts. That hurts a lot for no reason. And your warriors, when after they fought or before they fight, they can also easily throw like 12 javelins, which hurts for no reason again. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, this is kind of a surprise, making the Norse Gael pretty brutal in shooting. So nice.
Yeah. Just by volume. Next up is Dance of Death. It's an activation ability that takes either a uncommon or a rare die. Choose up to 3 of your non-exhausted units. Each one takes a fatigue. Roll as many available Saga dice as units selected and place them on your combat bonus. I'll be honest, I think this one's trash. Maybe other players disagree, and that's perfectly fine. I'm just too stupid to use this one because I think exhausting your own units with no real benefit, because you're putting a an uncommon or a rare on here, which is already kind of expensive if you see the other abilities. So, and then you also have to put fatigue on your units, and putting fatigues on units with the next ability can be so much better than this. So I think I think this one maybe in the at some stage of the game that I don't quite grasp yet. But what do you think, JP?
Yeah, you have to be pretty desperate to do this above some of the other abilities that we've already discussed. So, I don't know. I'm trying to think about a time I would actually want to play this. Otherwise, I would suggest people just put like a post-it note over this, so you just don't even bother looking at it.
Yeah. I mean, I understand if you have a unit with a banner and you have a warlord and you want to give these two give them fatigue, but then you're not doing anything with them really if you give them fatigue, and so like they just have to sit around. Otherwise, the fatigue's going to hurt you real bad. So I'm not sure how this one is used. Yeah.
All right. So expendable, the next one. This is for a common. This is orders or orders reaction. So just take note, this text has been updated in the, I guess, 2021 FAQ.
Yeah.
We're currently mid 2023, still waiting for 2022 FAQ. Anyway, so until the end of the turn, when a Norse Gale unit other than levies should suffer a fatigue, it can force a non-exhausted unit of friendly slaves, which is levies, within S to take the fatigue instead. All right. Fatigues around and moving it to your crappier units, always good, especially because you're very aggressive on your, I guess, your Norse Gale units, so your warriors and Hearthguards. Do you want to explain some of the intricacies and discussions surrounding this particular ability? Because this one keeps popping up.
So yeah. There's been a lot of discussion what the hell the Norse Gale means, and also what if slaves, like there's also some problem with just slaves instead of levies. So let's tackle the slaves levies thing first. So slaves is just the name for their levies. So there is a mercenary that is a levy, which is the scouts, and these guys can take the fatigue for the other Norse Gale units because they're slaves, they're levies, and they can they're an 8 stack of levies, and so they can definitely take the fatigue. And then there's also discussion whether Norse Gale unit means that this is only the core units and no mercenaries. And this, it was talked about that a lot. But the last thing that I saw was a semi-official reply. I'm not sure who. One of the guys at Studio Tomahawk that said this was only put in because people tried to use, like the opponent tried to use, putting their own fatigue to the Norse Gales levies. So they put in the Norse Gale here to say just it's basically just friendly units that can put fatigue to their levies, and not the opponent can do this. So this Norse Gale is not supposed to exclude mercenaries, but it's supposed to exclude the opponent. This is what I know right now, and this is how I ruled it at the last tournament.
So I think the uses are also just to be able to catapult a unit of Hearthguard or warriors 2-3 times, and then essentially arrive fatigue free. Especially, and this is especially important if you're having Dane axes, to be able to, or I guess, so your opponent cannot kind of negate your +1 and then also take advantage of your lower armor. So pretty snazzy little ability. Very nice.
It's super good. You basically play this every other turn just to make sure that you get your charges off and your warlord can get in and go super far, and the scouts can move for free, so they're super nice to put fatigue on, and then your levies are also great to put fatigue on.
I guess this also makes your really warlord next to levy kind of function like having the bodyguards as well, right? So it's super frustrating.
Yes.
Like you're not even removing models, you're just putting fatigue down. So and there's no limit, I guess, I mean, obviously 3 fatigues maximum, but that's pretty sweet. If you think you're hitting a warlord and then you're just putting fatigues on Levy, you're not even killing Levy, which is pretty depressing.
Yeah. And also the warlord with his Daneaxe hits back like a truck, so charging him is not fun, and then only putting fatigue on the levies
All right,
nearby,
so
not
super
fun.
depressing if you're not a Norse Gale, but yeah.
Cool. We like those abilities. Feels like Pagan Russ all
Right.
over again. Next up is Unbowed. It's an Ordos ability that can take any die. Until the end of the turn, each time your opponent uses a fatigue from one of your units, roll one of your available Saga dice and place it in your combat bonus. And if you use a rare, place the die rare facing up into the combat bonus rather than rolling it. So putting a rare on here means that every time your opponent uses your fatigue, you get a rare in your combat bonus, which is really, really good. But yeah, of course, you can also, if you end up spending a rare on here and your opponent doesn't even ever use your fatigue, it's very situational. I think you have to play them well and know if you want your opponent to use the fatigue or not, to know whether this is good or not.
Yeah, I think I've definitely not used fatigue once the rare was on here, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So there is that. Your opponent needs to play along for this to be effective. All right. The next one is Clenched Fist. This is a melee ability taking a uncommon or a rare. So take 3 of your available Saga dice, roll them, and place them on your combat bonus. You take 4 dice if you use a rare. Again, your available Saga dice are at a premium, so it means that you need to or your moves and everything else timed perfectly to be able to have enough Saga dice. So I guess what you're doing is you're moving everyone up super close, one charge away, and then doing all your orders. Or I guess you have to do your orders anyway, but doing all that stuff on the front end, and then only going in for the charge, so you actually have a chance to play or chance to roll your available Saga dice.
Like order matter so much for these guys, because if you don't play it right, you'll have lots of dice still on your board and no available Saga dice, which is not going to work. Order has definitely messed me up before.
But just for the newer players or people interested in Norse Gaels, you can place them directly on your combat bonus, and there's nothing stopping you from playing them directly in this melee and making the available Saga dice available, so to speak, for example, Spill Blood or some other ability later on.
Yes.
And is that how you cycle through more than 8 Saga dice per turn?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. You, by playing this Clenched Fists after you have moved up a lot, and then in the combat that I usually play Clenched Fists in, so it's a little bit enhanced, so to say. It's quite good to also play Spill Blood, because lots of people are going to die, and if you have warriors with heavy weapons, they're perfect for Spill Blood, because they kill more, but also they die a little bit more. And I try to spend all my Saga dice, maybe leave one ability Norse, which is the next one coming up, so we'll talk about it in a second here, leave that one up, and have Spill Blood and a Determination left, and then I have 7 available Saga dice to go into my combat bonus after this big fight, to fuel another very big fight with the 7 combat bonus dice and Norse, which is the next ability. So let's immediately talk about Norse then. Right, next up is Norse. It's a melee ability for heroes and Hearthguards only. It takes a uncommon or rare die. Until the end of the melee, the description of the combat bonus ability becomes: add an automatic hit to the hits you inflict, or increase your armor by 1. If you use a rare, both effects are resolved. So just to clarify, the last bit still is part of the description for the combat bonus. So if you can definitely trigger Norse with an uncommon and still have the same effect as if you triggered it with a rare, because the description is for the combat bonus. So if you use a rare, both effects are resolved is the new part of the combat bonus, which usually If you have a rare in the combat bonus, that gives 2 attack dice instead of 1. And if you now use a rare in the combat bonus, you get an automatic hit and you increase your armor by 1. So rares are super valuable in the combat bonus now.
This is pretty gross ability, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
So amazing. Even makes your guys who are just without the heavy weapons, makes them pretty viable because you're just getting automatic hits. So pretty tasty little ability if you can pull this one off.
Yeah, this also is the one of the rare cases where you can, if your opponent lets you, of course, you can, or if you can manage it somehow, you can charge in exhausted, or be charged when you're exhausted and still easily push like 7 hits through, because and automatic hits aren't tied to how many attacks you roll. So if you have one warrior, one Hearthguard, because this only works on heroes and Hearthguards, and he's rolling 2 dice, and you have 7 dice left in your combat bonus at Norse up, yeah, sure, that's 7 automatic hits, no problem. Quite annoying.
Yeah, so it makes wiping out those last little guys of Hearthguard that's generating a dice potentially pretty lethal. So makes you think twice if you've got a stacked combat pool. All right, I think we're already at the end of the battle board with one last one. So again, a 2 dice ability using a common and an uncommon. So Gaels, it's an orders ability. So until the start of your next turn, your warlord's armor is 6. Until then, at the start of every melee or shooting attack, he may take an available Saga dice, roll it, and place it on your combat bonus. Armor 6. However, if you are taking a Danax, it does mean that your armor is reduced down to 5, unfortunately. It's like, what's the ability called? Lord of War from the Anglo-Danes?
The Danes.
Same idea. However, still, armor 5 guy with the Danax. Nothing to... makes your opponent think twice about it. And then, I guess it kind of incentivizes you to get your warlord in there multiple times, which is not a difficult thing to do, especially if you're doing, for example, expendable or something like that, with some levy next to your warlord. Makes it pretty viable in terms of just having this guy do a bunch of combats and then surviving and having very few fatigues at the end.
Yeah, I think this can be insane value if you end up charging your warlord 2-3 times, because you will generate so little fatigue yourself because your armor is super high, and your opponent just gets huge losses, and so that's really good. And of course, shooting is, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it in a second. Your shooting is the biggest problem for the Norse Gaels, and so having your warlord be armor 6 into shooting, even with the Danax, is just makes it very consistent that he doesn't get sniped with like 3 shots.
Yeah, he's pretty like you're definitely using 2 dice already, so that limits the rest. But then it does mean that they become available Saga dice. So I guess
that's right. That's exactly
look
right.
at the positive side. So yeah, it does. It's not that bad.
If you have like 2-3 rares, which happens with 8 dice or 7 dice, that just happens. If you play like a tournament, that will happen in one of the turns. And then having these good orders, is so good because you can it's 1 die each, and you can just spend it to get them available again. Use your rares to re-roll them, use them on the other orders, and then also have Unbowed ready, which is the other order on here. Have your dice free, have expendable ready, which is another order, and so that's all these orders really help to keep your rares like important, and also keep your dice available.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I'm having some trouble imagining how I would run a Norse Gael warband. What's maybe let's split it in a all comers beginner friendly list, and then maybe if painting is no issue, go full out and explain the perfect loadout and all the options.
Yeah. Okay. So if I think the newcomers list is something along the lines of having a cool warlord with his Danax, a squad of Hearthguard of 4 Hearthguard with no equipment options, just to keep him safe a little bit, and then a singular or maybe 2 units. I think that's up to playstyle of the levies with their javelins, and then just the rest for in warriors with the heavy weapons. That's just really good. So I think it's 1 point of Hearthguard with no equipment, 1 point of levies with javelins, and then 4 points of warriors with heavy weapons, and your warlord with a heavy weapon. I think that works well to kind of get a feel for these guys.
All right, and what's the Norse Gale maximalist equipment option list that you would suggest?
So I think it's not that far off, and it's just what I think is best. I'm sure people will disagree, which is perfectly fine. I think it's the warlord with his heavy weapon, the 4 Hearthguard with no equipment. So that's good. That's a good start. Just a little bit of punch, and then a unit of scouts, which is 1 point for 8 levies that can move for free, and they can take fatigue, which is really good. And then I usually use the rest of my points for 1.5 points of levies with their javelins, and I split them into 11 and 7. And then there's 2.5 points left, and that's just 2 big 10-man warrior units. So there's a bunch of threats. There's the 2 big warrior units, which easily generate their 20 attacks, no problem per attack through the.
Would you take them with javelins or would you take them with heavy weapons?
That really depends who you play into. If you play into horses, I'd always play them with javelins. If you play into javelins yourself, I'd always play them with heavy weapons. And if you play into just sword and board people, I would also play them with heavy weapons.
If the people you're fighting can't close ranks, you take javelins?
Yeah.
If they can't close ranks, you take heavy weapons.
Yeah, and if they're if it's like levies with javelins, then having your warriors with javelins is also better than just having them with heavy weapons. But it really depends. Like, yeah, if they have warriors with javelins, and you know they will, if they charge you, you should basically have heavy weapons. And if you know you're only going to charge them, then you should have javelins. It's a pretty simple formula, but yeah,
okay,
that's what I do.
And what's your combo using Norse Gaels? How would you what sweet, realistic 2-3 abilities can you line up to make maximum damage?
I think usually in a turn, I play Spill Blood in the end to. Okay, let's go from the beginning. I think I have 7 Saga dice in most of my builds, and so usually 3 of them end up being a move because they're on foot. They're a little bit slow, unfortunately, but that's their downside. And you also need to close the distance. And so, yeah, start with clenched fists after you did all your moves, and have We Obey and Determination left. The warlord ability, not the ability on this board. Start with clenched fists. Get your extra attack dice. Do some damage with Spill Blood to gain all the attack dice back into your pool, and have Norse left on your board. So your warlord, when he finally charges in, he is armor 6 again. Even though he has a heavy weapon, he's armor 6, and he does a bunch of automatic hits. I think that's a very realistic turn of cycling through the abilities. Clench fists into Spill Blood into Norse. Yeah, that usually works for me.
All right. So what can the Norse Gael not deal with?
Shooting armies, like armies that, like the Welsh, for example, they're the worst nightmare for the Norse Gaels because they shoot and they're too fast. Huns, obviously no chance, because they just get exhausted too much before they get to the Huns. And yeah, any army that either has composite bows or horses with javelins, or is very good at keeping at like 1,000,000 shots into 12 to 18 inches. Like, yeah, that's a big problem. Like, Irish are also usually a problem, I think. I mean, there's no shooting defense on this board. Even the combat bonus has it cut out. So it's very, very tough to survive into shooting. And so that's why I also think the scouts are inevitable, because you need lots of terrain, and terrain makes you so slow that you need the scouts to basically position yourself in the terrain all game long, like the first 2 turns, to close the distance and not lose too many people while moving full speed. And then you pop out of the terrain and do some damage. That's how I played it.
Okay, I think that gives a general overview of the Norse Gaels. Let's move on to the model choice. Like we discussed before this, basically it's smashing together Irish and Vikings.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people using just the standard Victrix and then throwing in some extra javelin-looking dudes in there, and then they basically just look like Vikings with javelins. That's one option. I think the War Games Atlantic Irish throwing in some bodies there. The Victrix,
really cool. Yeah.
The Victrix kits, they don't 100% fit everything, but with like a little bit of cutting and some green stuff, you can go very far. You can definitely use some of the your levies and your warriors, maybe go a little bit more War Games Atlantic, and your Hearthguard and your Warlord go a little bit more Victrix with the milled bodies and stuff like that. Because I think the implication here is also that the kind of like the ruling elite, your Warlord and your Hearthguard, was a little bit more Norse, and the lower strata of society, like your warriors and your levy, were more local. So I think that distinction is also quite nice. But except for that, the metal options, Footsore, Gripping Beast, have pretty extensive lines where you can mix and match. I think Gripping Beast has a specific lower scale line, which looks slightly different from their Irish and other lines. And Footsore just kind of, you have Irish, you have Vikings, so just mix those two, and then you'll get pretty far anyway if you're going the metal route. Are there any other ones I've missed, or is that about it?
Yeah, I think the trick you told me, which I immediately did, because I have the guys right next to me on my table, is to use the Gallic bodies, because they have basically only have like cheap pants and no shirt on, which is really cool for the slaves. Really thematic for the slaves, because these guys look really dirty. Like if you paint them that way, with no shirt on and everything, they look poor. And I mean, they're called slaves, so that fits really well. And it's a trick you told me about like a year ago, I think.
I think the you can either use the Gallic or Gauls, I can't remember what they're called, or you can also use the Germanic
Germanic
tribes
PK,
or something like that. I think that one's probably better because it comes with a lot of javelins as well, and it comes with some dudes just in loincloth, which is maybe a little
You're
bit
absolutely
extreme.
right. It's a Germanic kit,
And quite a few guys just without shirt and just wearing trousers. And except for that, they look pretty generic. The hair is like all over the place. They have beards. So I think those ones work quite well.
Yeah. They look great. Yeah, I mean, I have them now, and they look great.
Awesome. So you've already taken them to a tournament once or twice?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
What are your thoughts about them now after taking them to a tournament?
I think they need the half-point rule to get the 1.5 points of levies, to make them 11 and 7, because that's very annoying to kill 2 levies off. Or have the chance to kill 2 levies off to take a Saga die, and 11 levies are just super annoying. They're not even that bad in melee, and they're very good at shooting. And so, yeah, I think that's important. And I mean, it's not an optional rule anymore, so that's cool.
I remember when it was an optional rule, and you forgot to read that part.
That's cool. Yeah, that happened to me. And then I paid for it, because the 1 point of levies split into 6 and 6 was just terrible. Yeah, I think their biggest problem is scenarios where you need to run a lot, and your opponent basically doesn't care because they own horses. That's a real big problem that I'm not sure it's very solvable.
So are we talking about What scenarios would you be thinking that they have some troubles with?
Like, for example, in feasting and pillaging, you start very far away from your opponent, and moving up all your units at once is just not very doable if you want to do any sort of damage.
Yeah, I guess if you have some horses, you can just put a small unit to block all the maneuvers and just waste a
that's
ton of
exactly right.
dice.
Yeah, and yeah, so that's super annoying. And then if the deployment is like L away from the borders, then they're perfectly fine in those scenarios. They can, because the levies need to move up with them. It's only within short that you can give the fatigue out to the unit nearby. So yeah, scenarios where you start all the way back, difficult, and of course when your opponent's just very agile and can shoot a lot, that's also difficult.
All right. And I think in terms of mercenaries, your scouts are useful because
They're
they
great.
generate a dice and they don't take a dice in terms of they have their first move is free.
Yep.
And they also have javelins, so that works quite nicely. Or I guess they can have bows as well if you really want to go that route. But
You don't want to go that
no,
route.
you don't. So
and they can take the combat bonus, which is great because it's really good, because giving the scouts the combat bonus also makes them kind of dangerous because they move for free anyway. They will throw their javelins. So
so that's pretty sweet. Are there any other mercenary options that you would take if you could take, for example, 2 points of mercenaries?
I'm not super sure. Of course, there's a bunch of cool options, but I think, yeah, the scouts are just the best. But I'm sure I'm missing some. But I looked through them before I went to the tournament, and I was like, I'm not, like, the others don't really synergize that well, and so I didn't take any of the other ones.
All right. Okay, so if you like aggressive faction, if you have some Viking models and you don't mind painting some extra guys, this is viable options if you want to mix up the playstyle a little bit.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people playing them. I don't know why. I think they're I mean they seem very fun. It's always fun to play against them as well because you're not I don't know.
You're definitely doing
Like
something.
something happens, people die.
Yeah.
And like it's always fun. So yeah, I think in terms of maybe I'm not sure why there aren't more, but hopefully people will pick it up a little bit.
Yeah, I think one very important thing, we have missed two things so far. The first is you can definitely use Gripping Beast, Dark Age Warriors for these guys, no problem at all. And also, what's your out of 5 rating for them, JP?
It's true. My out of 5 Howling Axes, I would say a 2.5, purely because of issues against shooting armies. And we see quite a few shooting armies, especially if you're mixing the ages.
That's right.
That becomes more of a problem. If you're not mixing the ages, I think you're going to be okay, except for maybe your Carolingians or something like that. But I think that's kind of. But in terms of playstyle and kind of enjoyment, both of you and your opponent, I would probably rate them higher. But just the weakness against shooting kind of brings them down a little bit.
Yeah, I'll give them 4 out of 5 blood spills. But yeah, that's only the fun part. And if they get into melee, they destroy. I think in Age of Vikings, they're up there with the within the best melee factions, of course, because that's all they do. And so yeah, their overall performance, I think, in tournaments, it's like 3 out of 5 naked dudes.
All right.
Yeah.
So he's good. All right. I think that covers the Norse Gaels for this particular faction overview. Thank you very much for joining me, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for our listeners to listening to the end. But unfortunately, this is the end. So
this is the end.
We're gonna be back in a few weeks' time with another faction. We keep saying, "Oh, we're gonna wait for the ones that are or we're going to do the ones that are least likely to be FAQ'd first.
Yeah.
So we're kind of running the clock on this one. So
it's getting tight.
yeah, it's going to get tight. So I think we're going to probably wade into a few factions which are going to get FAQ'd, but that's just the way it is. So anyway, thank you very much for listening, and speak to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.